Hello and welcome to Shoot the Breeze, where we take a nostalgic look at a random football magazine from the past. I'm Andy Smith, aka Scott's Footy Cards on Twitter, and with me is Tom Brogan.
Hello.
In each episode, we'll invite a special guest to join us in trawling through the magazine and discuss anything contained within it. This could be anything from an article to a photograph to a competition to an advert. Basically, if it's in it, then we'll talk about it. So sit back and let's shoot the breeze.
This week we welcome magazine editor Barrie Tomlinson. Barrie has worked in comics for over 50 years, having started working on Lion magazine back in 1964 before editing Tiger, Roy of the Rovers and the relaunched New Eagle in 1982. And it's an absolute pleasure to welcome Barrie onto the show.
Yes, it's good to be with you.
Thank you very much for joining us, Barrie. We have picked out as you know, we've got the man on himself, so we've picked out a Roy of the Rovers magazine to have a look through today. And so what we'll do is we normally do, start from the front and just have a look at the front cover. And it's quite noticeable that it doesn't actually contain any characters or storylines from the magazine on the cover. Instead, it's got a large photo of the World Cup trophy and a photo of the Brazil team beside it. And it says, "All set for Argentina." That's the heading at the top of the page. While top soccer team groups in Roy's World Cup booklet accompanies the Brazilian team photo, and this alludes to 2 pages within the magazine that contain a pull-out feature that can be collected over multiple weeks and kept together in a booklet, and we'll look more in detail inside on that. The cover price is 8p and it is out every Monday. So just to compare that, at this time, Shoot It magazine had a cover price of 15p. So that's fantastic value for money if you ask me. There's a few other prices, 30 cents for South Africa, Australia and New Zealand, and it's $1 in Malaysia. And so anything we can pick out from the front cover here, it's very colourful.
Yes, obviously we were doing the build-up for the Argentina World Cup, and it's unusual not to have a picture story on the cover, but having the World Cup itself and mentioning the booklet collecting scheme, which was always very popular. It was a fairly cheap thing for us to do because there were no extra pages in the comic, but we were dividing the pages up into half-page team groups and the readers could collect those. They were very happy with it and we were very happy with it. So booklets were a good idea.
Mm. It's certainly the thing I've noticed over all these magazines is the effort and the thought that goes into coming up with new things to keep people interested, and this is definitely one of them. And as you say, for very little effort, it becomes a collector's item for youngsters back then as well.
Oh yes, very much so, I think, yes. I mean, this is a front cover that I'd totally forgotten about, so I'm glad you reminded me about it.
Yeah. Anything from the front there, Tom?
Not particularly. I just wanted to ask Barrie, when did you realise that Roy of the Rovers had become just part of the general language? That kind of Roy of the Rovers became part of the sort of English language when people are trying to describe something sensational.
Yes, well, of course, Roy of the Rovers appeared in the first issue of Tiger, which was 1954, and Roy was always the most popular story in Tiger. So when I was asked to produce a football comic, I suggested that Roy should have his own comic. And that really built on the character, which had been around a long time. And it was a case that children were growing up, becoming dads, and they wanted their children to buy the comic. So the more generations that got involved, the more things like real Roy the Rovers stuff became a national catchphrase.
Okay, so we'll take a wee look inside for the first story. So, Football Family Robinson is the first one. And this was a story of a lower division team called Thatcham United, where all the players of the team had to either be Robinson family members or called Robinson. Can you clear that up for me, Barrie? Did they have to be family members or just called Robinson?
It was family members. This is a story that was originally in Hurricane comic, and when Hurricane merged into Tiger, the story began to appear in Tiger. Then it was dropped, and later on it came back as a story in Roy of the Rovers. So it's not one of the stories that I invented. it's one I inherited. So my knowledge of this particular story is not massive. I'm fascinated by the artwork because Joe Colquhoun did the artwork first of all in Hurricane, and then John Gillett took over. But I'm looking at this artwork and I can't see it's either of those artists. It might be someone doing a copy of John Gillett, doing a copy of Joe Colquhoun's characters.
It's interesting you say that, because the two names I've got written down for this were John Colquhoun and Joe Colquhoun and John Gillett, scripting by Tom Tully. But yeah, certainly you've got a keener eye than myself to notice that difference.
It's a very good copy, but I don't think it is John Gillett's artwork.
Okay, so we're going to have a wee read through this. So before we do, I'll just give a little background from where we are in storyline with this. So in the week before, Thatcham were playing the last match of the season at Branton Town. They've had a disastrous season and are in danger of having to apply for re-election in the 4th Division. And Branton scored in the opening seconds of the game after their goalie scored from a kick-out. The Thatcham new manager, one Tommy Robinson, is on the bench with Ma Robinson, and he's looking very worried. And it doesn't take long for Branton to go further ahead. Meanwhile, in the stand, pop singer Wayne Douglas, who has recently taken over ownership at the club, is also looking worried. It turns out that Wayne's real name is in fact Harry Robinson. Obviously, it had to be a Robinson. Now on the sidelines, Ma Robinson is holding a rolling pin with intent. The players respond to this and manage to scramble the ball over the line for a goal. So Thatcham require another 2 goals to be safe. So on to this week's storyline. So the game this week, it continues with the game as Thatcham attack after attack is thwarted. Suddenly Branton break away with Thatcham players committed forward. Alf Robinson intercepts and plays it back to his keeper, but he's short with the pass, and a Branton forward nips in and fires in goal number 3. Now this just happens as news comes in from elsewhere that the team they're fighting to finish above has gone further ahead. And Thatcham players trudge off dejected at half time. Meanwhile, the owner is on to his agent on the phone saying, "You've got to help me. I don't want a loser's image. What do I do?" In the dressing room, manager Tommy Robinson is nowhere to be found. So Ma Robinson takes over the team talk and she has a plan. Meanwhile, back in the stands, owner Wayne Douglas has been joined by manager Tommy Robinson, who's also looking for a way out of the club. Wayne reveals, "I've decided we'll cut our losses and quit right away. I'll take over a 1st Division club." And Tommy replies, "And make me manager. I'm not used to dealing with part-time idiots." 5 minutes later, the news of the move of Wayne and Tommy comes through over the TV in the dressing room. And this week's story ends with the news reporter asking, what happens to them now? So the game actually continued over the next 3 weeks of the magazine, culminating in Thatcham winning the game in a remarkable comeback. The very last moment of the game ended in controversy as a Branton goal was ruled out due to the referee blowing up for a dog on the park before the goal was scored. Another goal that Thatcham scored was a retaken penalty after the ball moved after being kicked, or before being kicked. While the rest of the team argued about who was to take it, the Thatcham keeper strode up and took everyone by surprise by slotting it away. So there was a lot going on there over those 3 weeks. There was a dog in the pitch. There was a retaken penalty. What I love about it is it seems a pretty classic format in that the stories carried along by the fans as well as the players on the pitch. And I love the fact that you can, even crowds like 40,000, you can have a fan on one side of the pit, one side of the stadium saying something, and then a fan on the other side of the stadium answering them. And I just loved that method of doing things.
Fans in our stories always had very good hearing.
Yeah. And also, they always had something to say as well.
It's interesting looking at that last picture. There's a triangle with bottom right saying my marks out of 10 for this story. That was a very popular idea with the readers. They did like marking stories out of 10 because at school, their work was being marked all the time. Here we gave them a chance to do their own marking. And that proved to be a very popular idea. And each time readers wrote to us, they would tell us what their favourite stories are. So we were always on top and knowing what story was popular and what wasn't, and whether the story carried on or not depended on the votes from the readers.
Was that? I mean, it's obviously a very good way of figuring out how things are popular. But was that a deliberate way of getting that information really without having to go do market research?
Yes, I mean this was a very cheap way of doing that sort of thing. Time the readers wrote to us, we asked them to give their 2 favourite stories. So I kept a great big chart on the wall so I could see what story was popular and which stories were popular, which weren't. And I could see it in an individual week. If a story went up, I could go back and look at that story and see what caused that increase in popularity.
Yeah. I mean, I love Math. Math Atcham was quite a character. She's got a big hat with flowers and all sorts in it, and then a rosette, which I love as well. It's just...
It reminds me a little bit of Victor Boscovic.
Yeah.
In The Hard Man.
And I mean, on the title, we've got a Robinson who I think's got a trapper's hat, and one's got a bowler's hat. So they certainly must come from all sort of walks of life. Moving on, pages 4 and 5 is Mike's Minimen. And this was a story that followed the ventures of Mike Daly and his table football team. Now, it was never referred to as Subutio, is that correct? I take it that would have been a copyright reason?
That's right. We don't call it Subutio, we call it table soccer all the way through. But it was a very popular story. It's one that we introduced in the first issue of Roy of the Rovers. A very simple, basic story, but the fact it involved table soccer, Subutio, made it very popular. And I find nowadays it's one of the stories that people really remember very well. All the Subutio players these days refer back to this story. So it's had a very much a lasting impression on the readership.
And again, marks out of 10 for the story there. And this episode here, Mike has won a trip to Australia as first prize in a raffle to see the World Table Football Championships. And he also has a free entry into a junior competition.
It was a nice variation to be able to do this sort of story, get away from the real life football pitch.
So I've got this was written by Ian Vosper. Would it have generally been the same people who, for a period of time who would do the storylines, or would they get mixed and matched?
We mixed and matched. If I came up with an idea for a new story, then I would judge which writer would be the best one to do it. And we were very fortunate. We had a very, very good team of writers. Have you got the name of the artist down?
I don't have the artist for this one. No,
I asked that because I've forgotten the name of the artist.
I'll look that one up. And I couldn't find the artist. I just had the writer for that one.
He was a young British artist, and the other day I asked his agent what his name was, and the agent had forgotten as well. So my apologies to the artist if he's listening into this.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear from him and remind myself what his name is, because he did a nice job on the story.
Okay, well, we'll have a wee look into that and see what we can find out. Okay, let's have a wee look on. So we're on to the first section that isn't strips. And this is page 6, and it's split into 2 sections. The top section is titled Great Goals and shows Gordon Smith of Rangers power home the winner against Celtic at Hampden Park in the Scottish League Cup. It looks like Derek Parlane, who is also looking on for the Jers, while Johannes Edvalson watches for Celtic, and Peter Latchford is the Celtic goalkeeper. Now, it says Super Smith sends Celts to defeat at the bottom of the photo, along with the details of a £2 win for James Stephen of Bells Hill, who requested a Rangers player for this feature. Now, it wasn't until earlier on when I was reading this out aloud that I realised the alliteration that was going on there with the Super Smith sends Celts to defeat. In the bottom it also says, is there a player or a team that you would like to see in the series? If your request is used, you win £2. Also ask the reader, as you mentioned, to name their top 2 stories. So another way of getting the market research on the popularity of the stories. And just as a spoiler, that League Cup final finished 2-1 after extra time to Rangers. David Cooper and Johannes Valsson with the other goals. So again, it's involving the reader, isn't it? Making them feel part of it.
Yes, indeed. Always involve the reader, make them feel part of the publication. And we were very generous with our prizes. £2. Wow.
Yeah. I'd sort of, I wouldn't say I pulled you up, but I sort of slagged off one of them. I think it was maybe Tigers ones on Twitter the other night, and you set me straight on it, where they weren't actually asking for individuals. They were asking for specific goals, because there was one where the person who scored it wasn't actually in the shot. I don't know if you remember that one, Barry. And it was I was making a bit of a deal about that, but as you pointed out, it was about the goal. It wasn't about the actual scorer themselves.
Yes, we had a very pleasant debate about that.
Yeah, I just accepted it. Yeah. So the next one on that page is an advert for Star-Lord, the magazine. It's advertising issue number 3 with a free Star Blast My Galactic Battle game, and it's a game they call Survival Training for You as Star-Lord Star Trooper. Now, some of the stories mentioned are Robusters, the all-robot disaster force slams into action to save Florida from the disaster of the decade. Strontium Dog, space pirates don't take prisoners, but they have a special reason for keeping Johnny Alpha alive, at least for now. Timequake, 2 James blockers existing at the same time cause a psycho overload for the normal space-time continuum, with gruesome results, plus more action-packed adventures with the Planet of the Damned and Mind Wars. It's available every Monday for 12p. The advert has a photo of a young kid at the bottom right looking up to the left in awe. At the top left, there's a drawing of the main character in the magazine, Star-Lord. So, I mean, 12p, again, it just shows you the what you're getting for Roy the Rovers at 8p. You know, it's definitely a bargain at that. This wasn't, Star-Lord wasn't one that I was overly, I've heard of Strontium Dog, but I wasn't really too aware of Star-Lord, the magazine.
No, it wasn't one of mine, so I'm not an expert on it at all. I don't think it lasted very long. Like a story like Strontium Dog, that lasted a long time.
PGA Tour, Corn Ferry Tour, PGA Tour.
Sorry,
PGA
Alexa
Tour
was
Championship.
talking to me. Alexa, stop.
For more.
Yeah.
Was it something we said?
Must have been, yeah.
So around that time, Barry, what other magazines would you have seen as your competition?
What magazine did I do?
What magazines would you have saw as your competition? Is Tigers competition, Roy the Rovers?
Yeah, some of the DC Thompson comics were our rivals there. But Roy the Rovers really was always in his own right. He didn't have much competition. And as I say, it was the DC Thompson titles, which you'll probably remind me of because I've forgotten their names.
Is it the Beano and the Dandy? And
No, beyond that, the sporting ones.
Okay.
I can't really even think of any other ones outside Tiger and Roy the Rovers.
Yeah, Tiger and Roy the Rovers were two quite special comics, I think. Tiger was the first comic I edited. And obviously Roy the Rovers was a big part of Tiger. So those two have always been my favourites.
Yeah. So just on this Star-Lord, so this magazine was first published in 1978 as a sister title to 2000 AD. Star-Lord, although actually better selling than 2000 AD, was cancelled after 22 issues and merged into 2000 AD. It was decided that 2 science fiction titles split the market, and since group editor John Sanders preferred 2000 AD, that was the one that remained. Yeah, so you're right. It didn't last very long, 22 issues. But yeah, it makes sense when it said there about having 2 science fiction. I mean, 2 is so similar. But I mean, could you say the same for Tiger and Roy the Rovers, that maybe it was a surprise that they were so popular, given that, you know, they're both sports related ones, even though I would say Tiger possibly looked at other sports a bit more. Would that be fair to say?
When we launched Roy of the Rovers as a separate title, there was always a danger that Tiger would suffer. So first of all, we ran the Roy of the Rovers story, 2 versions of it, one in Tiger and one in Roy of the Rovers, and did that for a few months. And then gradually dropped that out of Tiger. And Tiger didn't suffer at all, because we had a story called Billy's Boots, which took over as the #1 story in Tiger. So we had a very strong #1 story in Tiger, and of course also in Roy of the Rovers. So they were able to live side by side.
Yeah. I mean, it was certainly two magazines, 2 comics that we got as youngsters, you know, and we absolutely loved them. But as you say, having Billy's Boots in one, Roy of the Rovers in the other, you know, you're hooked on both of them. So you're going to get both of those magazines just to find out what happens. And anything else is really probably a bonus.
Yes, readers, a high percentage of readers bought both titles.
Okay, so on the next page of this is these are the sort of things I remember really loving, and again, it's probably the sort of thing that you say, that you touched on earlier on, that you put together. You know, it doesn't take a great deal other than, you know, the imagination to come up with it in the first place. But this is my team's performance this week, and it's a chart which is enable you to complete the details of your favourite team's Saturday performance. It says below you will find spaces to enter the team details, scores, goal scorers, and your comments on the match. So the whole page is dedicated to this sheet, where you can input some of the following: the name of the club, the opponents, the date, the competition, whether it's home and away, your team, spaces for 11 players and 1 sub, goal scorers for your team and the time scored, there's 5 spaces to input those details, and the same for the opposition team, the result and half-time score, the referee and the attendance. And there's a box to enter your comments on the match, and also a space where you can input results of other matches your team has played this week. And you can give your team marks out of 10 for their performance. And finally, there's a chart compiled by field where you can input your own name. I just love that chart compiled by. Again, it's the personal touch. It's you know, what makes it specific to that person, putting your name at the bottom.
It makes it feel quite important, putting their name to the chart. And these charts were very, very popular. I don't know if you found this, that filling in charts was something that readers liked doing enormously.
Yeah.
And as far as us editorial was concerned, that page was a very cheap page to produce. So we could spend money on other things in the comic and balance it out. But certainly my team's performance was something that was very popular.
So talking about charts, I mean, one of the great items that you would get with the magazines would be like the FA Cup charts and things like that. How much did you actually get involved in doing that, and you know, how much did you enjoy it?
The big free gift charts.
Yeah.
I used to take a day off from work and design the free gift chart, what was going into it, before I handed it over to an art person that would do a sophisticated layout, but I would do a rough pencil of what I needed on the chart and the sort of things that we could include in it. And I found that the more details we could put on the chart, the more popular it became. So it was a very good free gift.
Yeah. And also, you know, quite often you'd be able to do that over maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks as well, as you do it in you know, half sections, so that people can get a larger chart.
Yes, when I first took over as editor, the department which dealt with free gifts used to come along and offer us very standard free gifts, like a super space spinner or a plastic aeroplane or a pop gun or a potato firing gun. And I changed all that and made sure that the gifts were very much associated with the title. That's why the charts became something quite special in Tiger and in Roy. So it was good that the free gifts were really tailored to that publication.
And this is maybe a question on the spot, but what free gift, or you know, a chart like that, is there one that sticks in your mind that you just think that was the best one ever. That was the best we ever gave, or the most you were happy with?
Anyone I designed, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
I enjoyed doing the charts, and they were popular, so it was a good gift to have.
Okay, we'll move on to the main event of this magazine, and it's the Roy of the Rovers strip. And so here we have 2 pages of the main story in full colour across both pages, and it is very colourful. Now, as we've touched on, Roy the Rovers first appeared as a weekly feature in Tiger in September 1954 and ran all the way through to March 1993 and was relaunched as a monthly in September 93, but finally closed in March 1995. It's the story of Roy Race, footballer and later manager, mostly associated with Melchester Rovers. I think, I don't know if it was in your book, which we'll have a wee chat about later on, but I've certainly read or heard you say something along the fact about Melchester wasn't actually a particular place in the UK. But what was the thinking behind Melchester not being an actual place?
Well, Melchester was your local team. It's just around the corner from where you live. No matter where you live, it's your local team. We never said whether it was in the north or the south. It was your team. It was your local team. And that's something that I always emphasise all the way through. Roy never spoke with any particular accent, and we never hinted where Melchester was. It was just your local team, and that worked very well.
Yeah. Okay, so the storyline, I'm going to jump back to the week before just to set a bit of the storyline here. So we start with Melchester Rovers playing Alcoven, and they're meeting in the Stade de Colombes for the final of the European Champions Cup. Both teams emerged with Roy's great friend and rival, Johan Segerin, leading out the opposition. Roy had previously met Johan in an England versus Holland match where they won 5-1. So in the last week, Melchester went 1-0 up, but it wasn't long before Alcoven went back on level terms. And so on to this week's episode. With only 15 minutes gone, the game is tied at 1-1, and Roy Race is on the attack, but he's been closed down by a number of defenders and doesn't look best placed to get there first. But he does, and he knocks the ball down with his head into the path of the onrushing Jeff Giles. Instead of hitting the ball first time, Giles takes a touch and he gives a chance to the defender to come in and clear. A bit of banter ensues between Segerin and Race as Segerin grins over and says, "A good chance, Roy, but this time you do not have Trevor Francis and Malcolm MacDonald to tuck them away." Roy responds in a thought bubble to himself, "The cheeky perisher." Roy and Blackie Gray, his teammate, discuss the fact that Segerin and half his Alcoven teammates were in the team that were thrashed by England and that they are out for revenge in this game. Now, Alcoven are playing some great football now and their fans are becoming more vocal. They are passing the ball around the Melchester players and take the lead with a great team goal finish by Segerin. With Melchester going in 2-1 down at half time, Roy and Blackie discuss what they have to do in the second half to get back into the game. Roy's adamant that tactics he used in the England game will pull them through today. He insists they don't need to go all out attacking. The second half gets underway with Alcoven seeming to take control while Melchester play it cool and absorb the pressure. From the crowd comes, "They better not give the Dutchmen too much rope," just as a snapshot from the Dutch nearly caught out the Melchester defence. But Rovers keeper Charlie Carter did enough to stop it. Suddenly, Rovers break as Roy Race calls for the ball out wide in an area the Alcoven players wouldn't expect to see him in. Roy beats one man and then sends a long crossfield ball, which the onrushing Jeff Giles looks to be on course to meet. If he does meet it, then he's surely got a great chance to score as he's through and goal. But if he hesitates, he's finished. "This could be the equaliser," says a voice from the crowd, "if he's got the courage to volley it." And it's at this cliffhanger that this week's episode finishes on. So just as a spoiler, in the next week's magazine, the story continues on the front page. And it's a great shot from Jeff Giles as he manages to meet the ball in the volley under pressure from two Alcoven players. But the keeper makes an outstanding save to push the ball onto the bar and away. And it's headed away by a Dutch defender. But it falls to the feet of Roy Race, who unleashes the famous racy rocket of a shot into the top corner of the net to draw the game level at 2-2. Melchester are pressing for the winner, But Seagren is still driven on by his defeat to the English and goes on a terrific run before unleashing a shot. The ball takes a deflection off a Rovers player and agonisingly curls into the net, with keeper Charlie Carter unable to readjust. It's now 3-2 to Alcavan. Rovers have a final chance which grazes outside of the post before the referee blows for full time. Alcavan have done it. They are champions of Europe. Roy and Johan Seagren exchange shirts and handshakes at the end of the game. Roy says, "I've had my date Wembley a few months ago. It's your turn now." It's typical. A few of the things that we talk about, the crowd, taking the storyline. But the bit I love there is the one that I'm showing at the moment is like 3 TV screens. So it says all over Europe, millions of viewers saw the build-up. And I love that way of using the TV screens to show multiple phases of play within the one shot. So I love things like that. And
It's very exciting stuff, isn't it? I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. But it's like there was also in the Robinsons one as well, where they use a TV screen to further the storyline. So without
It's a good way of doing it.
without actually noticing that before, it seems quite a well used thing in this magazine certainly. But yeah, I just love the banter between them as well. Johan Seagren giving Roy a bit of banter, and Roy's thinking the cheeky perisher, which is just a cracking rephrase. I mean,
Very strong language used.
yeah.
So this is a classic Tom Tully script and David Skew artwork. And I'm pleased to see that Manchester are wearing the shirts that I designed.
So this was pre-Gola, wasn't it? Yeah. So Gola would have come after this.
Yes. When Manchester first appeared, they had blue shirts, yellow sleeves, I think. But I wanted to get a more modern design, so I came up with this one, which again proved to be very popular. And it's a very distinctive colour scheme, and it makes the team stand out when you see it in colour like this.
I suppose it's quite reminiscent then of the Liverpool story, isn't it? Because Liverpool changed to red for similar reasons.
Yes, but we had the classic yellow stripe going down, which was a bit different.
And then the number, there's the large number in the back, and then there's quite prominent numbers on the shoulder, the arm of the shoulder, which ahead of its time. We were, was it 1992, the European Championships, Tom, that had that similar thing?
Yeah, we were talking about that with numbers in the chest.
Yeah.
We always like to be ahead of the game.
The strips, we can, the Melchester Rovers all red. They've got the yellow stripe down one side, and then on the shorts, it's on the there's a stripe that goes on the opposite side as well. Yeah, fascinating how that works. The socks as well. Did the socks have a yellow stripe down the centre as well? Is that what I'm seeing?
Yes, down the front of the socks, yeah.
Very unusual that. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that in a pair of shorts, a real strip. So it'd be interesting if any team have ever done that. About Roy the Rovers, Tom, yourself, we haven't spoke about what sort of magazines would you have got back then?
I bought Roy the Rovers. No, I was a big fan of Roy the Rovers in particular. Hot Shot Hamish and Billy's Boots and all that. But Roy the Rovers, I was a big fan of. Was there ever, Barry? Was there ever a storyline that you turned down for Roy the Rovers? You thought was too much? I mean, you got up to an awful lot over the years.
It was always a bit difficult planning the story so much in advance. Tom Tully would come up to my office and we'd sit down for a couple of hours and talk about storylines, what was going to happen on the pitch and what was going to happen off the pitch. And we'd get it roughly worked out. Then we'd go off for lunch, and lunch would last maybe 2.5, 3 hours, during which we continued our planning. It was a very civilized way of planning a story. And we came back very happy and contented with what we'd done.
Okay, let's have a look at it. So the next one is Safest Hands in Soccer. This was written by Gil Page and drawn by Osvaldo Torta, as if I pronounced those names correctly.
Yes, that's right. He's a very talented South American artist.
So was Osvaldo, or was it someone else who, there was a story in your book about how they had to do a convoluted way during the Falklands crisis to get the artwork up to
Yes, there's an artist called Julio Schiaffino,
right.
who drew Hot Shot Hamish, and he was from Argentina. So when the war was on, we had to get the scripts translated in Italy and sent from Italy to Brazil, then from Brazil to Argentina, and take the same journey on the way back. And we didn't lose any issues at all. It worked very well indeed, but it took a bit more planning, but it did work. I mean, the South American artists that we used were very talented, and we tended to use quite a lot of people from South America and Italy because they had a very good standard of artwork.
Yeah, I guess, you know, as a kid and even growing up with that, you don't fully appreciate what goes on to deliver these stories. You don't think that situations like that would affect, you know, the delivery of Roy the Rovers magazine, for example.
Yes, indeed. And physically, it was a big job because artists tended to draw twice the size it appears in print and drawing on very thick board. So a 32-page issue would be very heavy to carry around. It's not like today when you've got computers and everything can be done instantly and without any great effort as far as carrying things is concerned. But these issues were very heavy to deal with. When the artwork came in, we had to check through it and then send it to a lettering artist by post again, and they would post them back to us. So it was a very complicated business getting a story ready to go to press.
Well, when you look back, obviously it got easier because of technology to do things like that. But do you look back and sort of miss the earlier days of doing things, the way things were done?
Well, yes, in my day, really, technology hadn't come into it. It was a long time ago, so computers and so on weren't used at all the times that I was producing the comics.
There was a mention, explain this to me. So there was something that said they changed from letterpress to web offset, which allowed you to then use colour prints. So what in layman's terms, what does that actually mean?
Oh, that was it was a wonderful thing to be able to switch from letterpress to offset, because we could use photographs for the first time, and I was determined that we would use photographs a lot. Some other comics tended to stay as they were and didn't make use of the new situation, but once we'd got that offset facility, it was important that we just changed the balance a little bit in the comic so we could produce more photographs.
Let's have a wee look at just the next page. So there's an advert here, and it's an advert for Tiger, and it says Part 2 World Cup 78, your pull-out booklet, and it's got a photo of Trevor Francis holding the World Cup aloft, and he's wearing a large rosette. The advert says, another 4 pages for this sensational pull-out souvenir booklet that is a must for all followers of the World Cup. This week's photos are of Scotland's Lou Macari and Willie Johnson, plus France's Dominic Rocheteau and Holland's Johan Neeskens. Tiger, 8p, out now. So, same price as Roy the Rovers, and I'm assuming that pull-out would just be the same, or if not very similar to the one that's in Roy the Rovers as well at the moment.
Yes, quite. It's interesting that we've got Trevor Francis there advertising the Tiger booklet, because Trevor Francis had signed to write for Tiger every week, and that was quite a scoop for Tiger to get the world's most expensive footballer writing for us. He wasn't writing for any of the big football magazines. We got in there first, and it was quite a scoop for us.
How would that have come about?
How did it come about? Gosh. Well, the first big sporting character we used was Gordon Banks, was the first to write for Tiger. And that came about after Gordon was voted the Tiger Sports Star of the Year by readers. And when I presented the trophy to Gordon, we were talking and I said, well, what have you got going for you? And he said, nothing really. And I thought, gosh, he's the World Cup winning goalkeeper. It's a chance to sign him up. So I signed him up there and then. And on the train back from Stoke, I had to work out how we were going to fit it in and how we could afford the fee for him. And it worked out that 2 pages of artwork was about the same price as we were paying Gordon. So that balanced out all right. And it was the start of bringing in real personalities into Tiger. As I say, Gordon was the first and Trevor Francis came along fairly soon afterwards. And all the big name characters that we used were so enthusiastic about the comic. They got very much involved with it. And that was a big plus because I think you could just get something ghostwritten and leave it at that. But these characters were very much involved in the comic itself.
Was it Gordon? I think you mentioned this in your book, how even when he went on holiday or he was away coaching or whatever, that he still would send postcards or something back. Is that?
That's right. He'd send a postcard addressed to the readers, and we would reproduce it in the comic. And again, it was making the readers feel that they were very involved in the title. They were very involved with someone like Gordon Banks, and that sort of connection worked very well.
I guess it shows what it meant to him as well, that it probably didn't really feel too much like work, that he could still do this when he was away.
It was it wasn't work. It was a pleasure to do all these things.
So you've worked with, I mean, some of the names is Geoffrey Boycott. Let's see some of the other names that Eric Borcombe, Ernie Wise. Just some of the names you've worked with have just been, you must have been pinching yourself thinking, how's this happening?
Yes, it was partly, I think, the reputation of the comics, because they've been around a long time, the characters in the comics, and they meant something to people. And I did seem to have an ability to be able to persuade people to do things for us. I mean, Morecambe and Wise, they were the top show business people in the country. And when I approached them and asked if Eric would write for Roy of the Rovers and Ernie write for Tiger, they agreed straight away. And Ernie came to so many of our Tiger functions that it was great. And the readers liked seeing photographs of him, of these characters involved with the title. So that was very good. I mean, the first issue of Roy of the Rovers, I managed to get Prince Philip to write an article for the first issue. And that again was something of a scoop, to getting a member of the royal family to write for a children's comic.
I guess, as you've highlighted, I guess it just highlights the standing of the magazines at the time, that it was almost showbiz, I guess, in their own right, that, people wanted to be part of it. Yeah,
very much so. As I say, the reputation of the comics was first class. I remember going along to Lord's Cricket Ground on a non-cricketing day. I had a meeting with Geoffrey Boycott at Lord's, and I got to the gate and said, I've got an appointment with Geoffrey Boycott. And the gateman said, no, you can't come in here. Who are you from? I said, I'm from IPC magazines, which at that time was the largest publishing house in Europe. He said, no, I don't care where you're from, you can't come in. And this went on for about 20 minutes. And eventually I said, well, it's for Tiger. And he said, for Tiger? Come on in, of course you can come in. And off I went. So that's the sort of reputation the comics had at that time.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, some of the other names here, Jackie Stewart was won the Sports Star of the Year twice. and Tiger that we're talking about here. Peter Shelton, Seb Coe, just, you know, big name after big name. You signed Jack Charlton, Trevor Francis. So talk a little bit more about Trevor here. So it when you signed him up as a writer just as he was going over to the States, is that right?
That's right, yes. I was fortunate that I was able to go to America and see him play for Detroit Express. We just got to the ground in time to watch the match, and he scored 4 goals, which wasn't bad. But yes, we were able, when he went to America, we weren't quite sure, first of all, whether we'd be able to carry on with the series, but it worked okay.
How was the magazine over in the States? Was it any, you know, did it have a following? Was there a good readership over there?
No, it didn't have, unfortunately. There was a lot of interest in it. I did a few interviews while I was over there, but we never established any great sales in America. In Canada, yes, but not in America.
Why do you think? Is that because of the number of expats that would be in Canada?
Yes, I think at that time, soccer, as they call it, wasn't as popular as it is now.
Okay, let's have a wee look at the next page, which is Roy's Summer Quiz League. This is the first in a series of summer quiz leagues and has been introduced by Roy Race himself. He says, each week I will be presenting a football quiz in which you score a goal for each correct answer. At the end of the quiz, you can add up the number of goals you've scored and see if you've won the match. There are 5 questions. If you score 4 or 5, then you win the match and get 2 points. If you score 2 or 3 goals, you draw the match and get 1 point. If you score 0 or 1 goal, then you lose the match and get no points. There's a box to record the number of points you got this week, the number you had from last week, and your new total to carry forward to next week. Now, question 1 is accompanied by a black and white photo of the Scotland World Cup squad in the recording studio with their headphones on. They are sat around a cardboard cutout of Rod Stewart, obviously not able to make this a part of the recording of the song Ole Ole. This just reminds me of the famous technique that you use to get Roy Race introduced to human beings, shall we say, with the cardboard cutout of Roy Race, which became just an iconic thing. Talk us a bit through that. I mean, talk us through the idea of doing that and how people reacted to it.
It was very good. The cardboard cutout went to so many different places. I remember going to an England training session and taking the cutout with me. And I stood on the touchline watching a practice match with Roy standing next to me. And one of the England coaches came across to me and said, "There's more life in your cardboard cutout than there is in the England forward line." So yes, people really enjoyed posing with the cutout. We've got a great series of photographs of people like Bobby Robson posing with the cutout, and Sir Alf Ramsey and so on.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen Suzanne Dando was she one as well, or I think, and I can picture him with a Santa Claus outfit on and things like that, which was another popular thing of the time to guess who the Santa Claus was.
Yes, we did a sort of pantomime feature in the Christmas issue where we had a famous personality join Roy in a sort of crazy picture story. And Suzanne Dando was one of the people that did that. Sharon Davis was another.
Okay, we're going to have a look at, so the next one's Simon's Secret. So this was a partly bionic. I think he had one leg which was bionic and bionic hearing or something like that. Move on to the centre spread, which is Sign Please. And for this one, we have Cyril Regis. So again, this is where a famous sportsman's photo is provided, usually in colour, and it's signed by the star as well. So how would the signature thing work? Would there be a copy of the photograph and they would actually sign it, or would it be imposed onto the photograph?
Yes, they would sign on a piece of board, and we would then superimpose that on the photograph.
Right.
Again, people were quite keen to do that, but there was no problem at all.
Mm-hmm. So the stars featured are done so at the request of the reader once again, and anyone who gets the request met wins £2. And again, as you quite rightly point out, £2 is a lot of money back then. In this case, Kevin Jelfs of Droitwich wins the £2, and the magazine requests that you also tell them your top 2 stories when you write in, so all the way through that. Okay, so we're going to just jump out the magazine for a few minutes here, Barry. I'm going to turn the tables and do a focus on yourself, if that's okay. So I'm just going to fire some questions at you, if you can let me know your answers. Full name?
Barrie James Tomlinson.
Okay, Barrie James. Okay, what was your birthplace?
I was born in St Albans in Hertfordshire.
Okay, and what was your first car?
My first car was a Mini.
Do you remember the colour?
It was blue.
Blue.
It's a bit of a coincidence that we had a story in Tiger called Martin's Marvellous Mini.
Yeah.
That idea came about after I bought my own Mini.
Right, I remember that one very well. Who's your favourite player of all time? Let's open this up, because I know you like cricket and stuff like that. So your favourite sportsman of all time?
Well, I suppose football would be Gordon Banks, I suppose. And cricket, it would have to be Geoffrey Boycott.
Who's your favourite football team?
Not just the Rovers.
Brilliant answer. What's the most memorable match that you remember?
They were all memorable, so much so that I can't remember a particular one.
Another good answer. What's been the biggest thrill of your life? And I've realised that there's probably been quite a few.
Yes, that's another good, but there's so many. Launching Roy of The Rovers, becoming editor of Tiger before that, and launching so many comics over the years. They're always a big thrill to get involved in launching a new comic.
Okay, what's been your biggest disappointment?
That Wildcat comic, which I launched right at the end of my comics career, and it brought in everything that I'd learned over the years. It had very good contributors, and it should have lasted much longer than it did. That was a disappointment when that didn't last, but it's good that it's still remembered today, and a lot of the stories are now being reprinted by Rebellion. So I think we got it right, but there was something wrong somewhere. The distribution didn't work as it should have done.
Mm-hmm. What's the best country that you've visited?
I enjoyed going to Australia. I went out there to join the England cricket team because I was asked to produce a cricket magazine. So I went out there, met all the cricketers, got to know them, got to know a lot of the Australian people as well. And I met Kerry Packer, who was a big personality in the Australian world of cricket. And I was all set to go. And when I got back, they said, no, we don't want you to do a cricket one. I want you to do another football comic. So very enjoyable trip to Australia, but it was wasted to one extent. But I came back and launched a new football title, which was in fact Roy of the Rovers.
Right. The rest is history, as they say. Yes. Miscellaneous likes. So give me a couple of things that you like to do.
These days, I like drawing. I do pencil drawings, and I find that very relaxing. And I've just finished my third book and trying to find a publisher. So any publishers around would like to take on my third book would be very welcome.
I'll leave that in your hands, Tom, since you're the man with the ear of the publishers.
Yeah, well, looking for a publisher now, yes.
Okay. Miscellaneous dislikes. So what's a couple of things that drive you up the wall?
People who talk very loudly. Nothing personal today. No one's talking loudly. You're okay. People who talk loudly and fish.
Fish.
I don't like fish.
As in the food or just swimming about fish?
No, just as a food.
Right. Okay. Okay. Favourite food?
Trifle.
Trifle. Very nice. I can honestly say that's the first time we've had trifle as an answer.
When I was working, we had business lunches. I was quite famous for having the same lunch almost every time, which was melon, steak, and trifle. So if people took me out, they knew what to order.
Yeah. Okay. Favourite TV show of all time?
Favourite?
TV show? Television?
Ooh. 40 Towers, I suppose.
Okay, that's a good one. Favourite singers or groups?
Famous?
Singers, favourite singers. You can have two.
In my younger days, it was Ruby Murray. I was an enormous fan of Ruby Murray, who is now probably better known as a slang name for curry, Ruby Murray. But yes, Ruby Murray was my favourite when I was younger.
Okay, who's your best friend?
My best friend would be my wife.
Okay. Who's been the biggest influence on you?
I think Marcus Morris, who was the editor of the original Eagle. I was a reader of the original version of Eagle, and I really appreciated the things he did in that publication. It was the first time I'd read a comic where I knew the name of the editor. And he also involved personalities of the day in that title, and that taught me a lot. So he had a big influence on me. Later on, in my very early days of journalism, Sticks the cartoonist taught me a lot about humour, a lot about presentation. So I think perhaps those two.
Okay, good ones. And final question. Which person in the world would you most like to meet?
That is a difficult one, isn't it? Roy Race, probably.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you, Barry. Tom, do you have any questions?
Yeah, well, we've got your book here, Barry, Comic Book Hero, which tells all about your days working in publishing. As Andy just there had asked you who you would most like to meet, I think you've met everyone. I think this book goes through all the amazing people that you've met. Barry, but I'm just personally intrigued about Peter Sellers.
Yes, that was a very special day because I was a great fan of Peter Sellers and the Goon Show. And a hi-fi magazine asked me to go along to interview him about his hi-fi collection. But we did it in two parts. I interviewed him with more humorous things, and later on somebody else came along for the hi-fi part of it. But meeting him was a great occasion. And I got a picture of him reading Tiger, which was quite nice. So that was a big day for me.
There's also the Anti-Trombone League was involved along the way as well, that you set up.
The Anti-Trombone League, yes.
Was Peter was he a member of that? He certainly.
Member of that, yes.
Yeah.
When I went to do the interview, he didn't know I was the same person that organised the Anti-Trombone League, and so I was able to remind him about it. And I was quite pleased that he remembered it in great detail. I've got some very nice letters from him, full of Peter Sellers' humour, which are great souvenirs.
Yeah, just as a bit of background in that, it was a free magazine that you set up while you were in the Army Pay Corps. Is that right? That you set up free of charge to fellow soldiers.
Yes,
I guess that would have been your first interaction, your first introduction to working with magazines then?
Yes, it was indeed. I hadn't done anything in journalism at all. And in the army, this guy came along who had a trombone and he practiced it day and night. So I said, well, let's form the Anti-Trombone League. And people signed a petition. And then someone suggested I did a magazine based on this. And that was my first entry into the world of journalism. And once I'd done that, I was hooked. Mm-hmm. And my whole direction of my life changed.
I think it sort of gave a clue of what was to come in terms of how you could get the big names in, because it was, you managed to get some work done by Styx back at the time, and also Roy Castle and Spike Milligan became members.
Yes, indeed. Yes, a lot of the top show business names agreed to get involved with that, and that was the first inkling I had that I had the ability to persuade people to do things.
It's a good skill. We'll just round it up if that's okay then. So the book that Tom's got there, that's Comic Book Hero, which I've read and really enjoyed. In fact, I've read it a couple of times. That's how much I enjoyed it. Where's the best place to get the book, Barry?
Well, there's two books. There's Comic Book Hero, which is about all the other comics I got involved with, other than Roy the Rovers, because my first book was called Real Roy the Rovers Stuff, and that's all about Roy. And the second book is about all the other comics. There are a few copies left on Amazon, I believe, and certainly you could get a Kindle version quite easily, I think, but there are still a few paper copies around.
Did you say you're working on a third book at the moment?
Yes.
What's that about?
The first two books are really all about the world of comics, and this one is about all the things I've done in my life, starting with my school days. I was a police cadet, then my national service, then how I got into journalism. And there is quite a long chapter on comics in the middle of the book. So I'm hoping that someone will come along and publish it, because I think it'd be interesting to people to read all the things I've done.
Okay, listen, Barry, thank you very much for taking your time out. It's been a long time coming, and I've been wanting to get you on the podcast for a long time. So it's been an absolute pleasure and an honour to have you on, because you're a legend amongst the sort of things that Tom and I do for the podcast and basically for fun. So thank you very much for spending your time.
Well, thank you very much. It's been real Roy the Rovers.
Great stuff. Listen, and if you're listening to the podcast, please what's your Twitter handle, your Twitter account name, Barry?
You find me on Twitter at Barrie, Barrie, editor 1.
Okay, so definitely give him a follow, because there's some cracking memories and pictures and stuff that get posted on there. So follow Barry on there, and as always, follow us on ShootTB_podcast. Listening along with the podcast, there will be a web page that you can follow along and watch the pages that we've shared as well while you listen. So as always, please give us some feedback. Thank you once again to Barry. Thank you to Tom for being Tom.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks, Barry.
Thank you.
And until the next time, let's shoot the breeze.